Well, hello, Confirmands. I hope you are well. It is time for lesson 23, if you can believe it. So we're in year 2, Life of Christ, lesson 23. That's the lesson on sex, marriage, and divorce. If you're watching this with your parents, I'm sorry. But, you should talk to them about this stuff anyway. I know that it's embarrassing. I know that it's hard, but it's really, really important that you benefit from their wisdom. All right, so we're still on the 29th. We're still having the soup suppers. Everything is still at peace. That you should come to that soup supper. The treats are great. The soup is great. It's fun to be together. 5:30 to 6:30 is the soup supper. 6:30 we have the in-person discussion group. And I got to tell you, last week's discussion group was the best ever. I mean, you guys came to play. I felt great about it. The older people who were in the room, they were impressed with you. It just was awesome. So, I don't know what happened, that you guys all showed up to play at the same time, but I got to tell you that I am tremendously grateful. And it would be great if we could keep doing that level of involvement, that level of connection. So thank you, and I appreciate you. Then we have the Lenten service at 7 o'clock, and online discussion group, of course, at 8. So again, it's at peace. It is the last of the soup suppers, and then you just need to remember that the week after that, April 5th, there's no confirmation because it's Holy Week. We have services on Maundy, Thursday. That's the night in history where Jesus washed his disciples' feet and started the Last Supper, and was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then there's services at Good Friday. That's the day that Jesus dies. The Maundy, Thursday services are at Nelsonville at either 2 in the afternoon or 7 in the evening. The Good Friday services are at Peace at 8 in the evening. And then Easter Sunday, of course, we have normal church services, 8:30 at Peace and 10:15 at Nelsonville. And then the Wednesday after that, April 12th, excuse me, we don't have confirmation. So we've got this lesson on the 29th, then we have Holy Week, and then we have a week off. We don't have a whole lot left of this year. I don't know, 4 or 5 lessons, something like that. So we are very, very quickly reaching the end of year 2. All right. Before we jump into the topic, the first 4 words of the phrase that pays, as always, I mean, not always, but most of the time, we're doing quotes from Luther now. This is no different, right? So, 4 words from Martin Luther. For they who think. Now, we're talking about sex, marriage, and divorce. We just need to be really clear up front that you have no business having sex at this point in your life. You're just too young. You can't figure out the risks. You're not ready for any of the consequences. You just got to put it on the shelf for some time later in your life. And if you just decide, that's for later in my life, a whole lot of temptation goes away. You're not trying to figure out in the moment, how far you should go or what's okay, or, does she love me or does he care for me? No, just let it go for now. You'll get there, right? I mean, and it won't be all that long. But right now, you just have no business, actually participating in any kind of sexual contact. The state of Wisconsin is absolutely clear about this, that a person under 18 cannot consent to having sex. It's impossible. And if you're having sex with someone who's below the age of 18, you're taking a serious legal risk. If you're below the age of 18, your partner is taking a serious legal risk. 16 and 17-year-olds are allowed some sexual contact, but none of the big stuff, right? So just put it away. Just put it away. Get through high school, right, before you even think about it. And I want you to get married before you think about any of the big stuff, all right? So, I have some stuff on the sheet here about Wisconsin law. It is terribly clear, right? There's no gray area here. Just let it go. Now, there's an ickiness that happens in a lot of towns, and it happens in our town too, where junior or senior boys in high school will try to date freshman or sophomore girls, that they want to be that girl's first sexual partner. I know it's intoxicating when someone 3 years older than you in high school pays attention to you and cares about you. They don't care about you. What they want to do with you is illegal. It's not in your best interest. It's not love. It's just icky. So just don't. And if a boy who's much older, if you're a young woman and a boy who's much older is trying to make time with you, just show him the door, because it's going to end in tears, right? The last thing, and as long as we're on icky, right? If someone is taking advantage of you sexually, if someone is making you do things that you don't want to do or that you shouldn't be doing, even if it's a family member, even if it's a neighbor, that your family loves and trusts, there's help for you, right? I'm a mandatory reporter. That means if you tell me something, I have to get you help. I will not be part of the problem. I will not be part of the silence that's hurting you. Pastor Gretchen's a mandatory reporter, if you'd rather tell a woman than me. Your teachers at school are mandatory reporters. There is help for you. There is protection for you, and you do not deserve what's being done to you. And I am sorry. If what I'm saying here is true in any of your lives, that you're being taken advantage of, let's work together to get you to a place of safety and security. I'm very, very sorry. Now, okay, so wait. Don't be stupid. If someone a couple years older than you seems to be paying you all kinds of attention and saying they love you, and don't let yourself get abused, right? Now we're ready to talk about, what the basic outlines of Christian sexuality and Christian doctrine are in this area, all right? So, but before we do that, as a palate cleanser, that's something that you do between courses of a fancy meal, palate cleanser, right? You use that at school, right? That'll impress them. Okay, let's do 4 more words of the phrase that pays. They make an end. They make an, A-N, end, E-N-D. All right. So you've gotten talks before about sex and relationships and such, right? Maybe you've had a talk with your family. I hope you have. But there's the one at school, which tends to be basic information about parts and about plumbing, basic information about disease prevention, and basic information about pregnancy prevention. Then, when you're, 13, there starts being that weird thing at the doctor's office where they ask your parents to step into the hall, right? And then they ask you, are you really not taking drugs? Are you really not smoking? Are you really not drinking? Are you really not having sex? And, then they talk to you about how to protect yourself against, again, diseases and pregnancies. And by the way, docs are mandatory reporters too. So if you said that you were being sexually abused, your doc has to report that too, has to try to get you help. All right. And then there's traditional sort of talk about sex among the religious, right? Among many of the religious, there's this belief that if we talk about sex, it's going to just light a fire in you and you'll be unable to stop yourself from exploring that world. That's nonsense, right? If you have the information you need, you can make choices for what you want to do and where you want to go. But there's an awful lot of religious people who think that it should never be discussed. And there are not a few religious people who think that even applies in families. We just don't talk about this. Now, I went to a religious school, a very conservative religious school, and the basic message of the school that I went to was twofold. First, sex is filthy, right? It's dirty. Only dirty people do it, and you should save it for someone you love. That never made a whole lot of sense to me, that I was supposed to save something awful for someone I loved. But that was, pretty much the teaching that we got. And we just have to do better than that, right? I mean, we just have to. And I'm going to try. And if you, your parents, your families want to have more conversations, I'll try to do that. And you won't die, right? 2 more words of the phrase that pays. Of temptation. Of temptation. See, it's even connected to what we're talking about here today. All right. We believe that sex is a gift of God. and that the fullness of sexual expression belongs in a marriage. That this is where the fullness of sex is supposed to happen, when you're married to someone. We think sex is precious, we think it's joyful and it's good, we think it actually means something, that it binds two people together in a unique way, and that it's sacred. That there's something holy about it, right? We don't think that the purpose of sex is recreation. We don't think that other people are flavors for you to try. We don't think that other people are out there for you to possess, much less for you to use, right? Every person walking around is created by God, is loved by God, is a child of God. And we should never do anything to anyone that's not in their best interest, right? We certainly shouldn't do something to someone that could hurt them, or could cost them their future, or put their future at risk, or damage them in any way. But when you're older and sex becomes appropriate and you have opportunities, you need to say to yourself, is this thing I want to do, is that in the best interest of that other person? Or does it put them at risk? Could it injure them emotionally or physically? Could it take their future off track? Am I asking them to take a risk of their whole life, right? And if the answer is yes, then, go get ice cream and say goodnight to each other and do something else, right? Sex is supposed to bless a couple. It's supposed to increase the safety and the security of both people in that relationship. It's supposed to be a gift. It's not something we take. It's not something that we do to someone. It's a gift. It's a gift of God, and it's good. Now, just to cover all our bases here, right? What do we think about LGBTQ plus people, right? In the ELCA, that's our church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, we believe something that, frankly, a lot of other churches haven't gotten to, right? A lot of other churches will tell you that gay, lesbian, bisexual people are perverts, or are dirty, or can't please God unless they pretend that they're straight, or unless they're celibate. Completely celibate means they never have sex ever in their whole life, right? We think that lesbians, gays, bisexuals, the whole alphabet, we think that they're children of God just like everyone else, and that they're fully capable of living lives that are stable and holy, right? We think, though, that the rules for LGBTQ plus people are exactly the same rules as for straight people. That just because you're part of, that you're a different letter of the alphabet, that you can have all the sex you want, or you can have all the partners you want. Nonsense, we think. We think that people of different orientations are children of God, are called to live lives of holiness and purity like everyone else. And so the rule is the same for everyone, that if you're married, you're supposed to be faithful in your marriage. And if you're not married, you're not supposed to be having sex. It's a pretty simple rule. All right. The next word is the phrase that pays. 4 more words. By yielding to it. By yielding to it. And you can throw a comma there if you want. All right. We got 3 stories from Jesus about marriage, about sexuality, right? One is this wedding at Cana where Jesus goes and he turns the water to wine. So I'm just going to read you the story and then we'll do a few little points, but most of the discussion will happen either in your family or in our discussion group, all right? So from John 2. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding, and when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. And when the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who'd drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you've kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Right, so this story actually shows up in a lot of wedding ceremonies, right? That when we're talking about that these two people have come to be joined, right, in marriage, a holy estate which Jesus adorned and beautified by his first miracle at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, right? That we say, you know, this thing that you're about to do, this getting married, we know that that's cool with Jesus, because Jesus showed up at a wedding and not only was a guest at the wedding, but he helped put on the reception. He helped this couple avoid embarrassment of having all their guests there and no wine. So we know that Jesus is cool with weddings. Otherwise, he wouldn't have shown up. He certainly wouldn't have helped, right? So, you know, there are people, you're going to meet people from time to time who say that the best course of action of life is to never have sex, to never get married. And we say to that, well, maybe for a person here or there, but for the vast swath of humanity, we tend to need each other, and Jesus blesses this manner of life. Doesn't mean that if you never get married, you're outside of Jesus' blessing, but if you want to get married, you know that Jesus is cool with that. All right. Next words of the phrase that pays. Only set themselves. Only set themselves. Okay, a story from Mark chapter 10. Jesus left that place and went to the region of Judea and beyond the Jordan. And the crowds again gathered around him. And as was his custom, he again taught them. Some Pharisees came, and to test him they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." And then in the house, the disciples asked him again about the matter, and he said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." Now, there's so much to talk about there, and we'll get to some of it in the discussion group, but first, 2 more words from the phrase that pays. On fire. On fire. Now, here's part of what's going on. That the Pharisees who asked Jesus this question about divorce, they're trying to trap him, right? Because there was a huge fight happening during that time of history between 2 rabbinical schools. 2 rabbis had different opinions about what and when a man could divorce his wife. I mean, don't miss this, that Jesus thinks that women are moral actors too, that whatever a man can do, a woman can do, whatever a man shouldn't do, a woman shouldn't do. Jesus has tremendous respect for women. That is completely different from most of what's going on, you know, in the time in which he lived, and frankly, still kind of rare in some places today. But at any rate, there were these 2 rabbis, right? Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, who disagreed about what circumstances allowed for a man to get divorced, right? So the biggest group was the group that followed Rabbi Hillel, who believed that you could get divorced, a man could divorce his wife for almost any reason, right? Including burning his breakfast, right? And that divorce could be real easy, right? You just push her outside the tent, right? And you say to the 3 sides, "I divorce her, I divorce her, I divorce her," right? You give her a piece of paper that you've written that you've divorced her, and she is gone. There's no spousal support. There's no visitation. She doesn't have any access to the kids. She doesn't have any access to shared marital assets. She's just gone, right? She can be a beggar. She can be a prostitute. She can try to get her daddy to take her back in, but she's gone. Now, Rabbi Hillel is working off a passage in the law of Moses that says that a man can write a certificate of divorce for his wife if he finds any indecency in her, right? And Rabbi Hillel thought any indecency meant any indecency. That the key word in the sentence was any. That if you're mad at her for anything, if she argues too much, if she's too opinionated, if she's too bossy, if you just, you're just tired of her, right? Any indecency, you can divorce your wife. A whole lot of guys thought that was a great interpretation of Moses' law, because it gave them freedom to do whatever they wanted to do, right? Sadly, there was a guy who got in the way of that. That was Rabbi Shammai. And Rabbi Shammai said that, you got the right sentence of Moses, but you're reading it wrong. You're saying that a man can divorce his wife from any indecency, right? Any is not the most important word. Indecency is the most important word. A man can divorce his wife if he finds any indecency in her. If she slept around. If she had an affair. Yeah, then you probably can't save this thing, right? So what they're trying to do here, what the Pharisees are trying to do here is to trap Jesus, right? They're trying to get him to say, to affiliate himself with one or the other of these schools. Probably it would be best for the Pharisees if they could affiliate him, with the school of Shammai, the hardcore school, right? That says no divorce, because then they think the crowds will split off from Jesus, that Jesus will be alienated from many of his followers. Right? It could also be that the Pharisees are trying to get Jesus to take a stand on a current political issue, right? Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, has stolen his brother's wife. Right? Herod divorced his wife. His brother's wife divorced the brother, and then the two of them got together. You think Thanksgiving is complicated at your house, right? And so John got himself in trouble and then beheaded because John said that what Herod done was wrong. That Herod should not have divorced his wife. That the brother's wife, Philip's wife, should not have divorced him. That they shouldn't have gotten together. That it was wrong all the way around. And if the Pharisees can get Jesus in public to say that you shouldn't get divorced, they can follow up, how about the king? And they can get Jesus in trouble with Herod, right? So it's another possible trap. Or, maybe Jesus is just going to punt on Moses' law completely. That Jesus is going to say, hey, Moses who? Who cares what Moses said? And then they can go to work alienating from both the religiously observant people and from people who just say, well, you're not supposed to talk smack about Moses. Moses and Moses' law is kind of the heart of what it means to be Jesus or Jewish. So they're trying to trap Jesus in this story, in this thing, and Jesus comes back at him with something from Genesis, right? You want to play with Moses and his law about certificates of divorce? Fine. But that's not what marriage is supposed to be. When God created human beings, when God created marriage, he meant that the two would become one. They're no longer two, but they're one. And it's God's intention that a husband and wife would be faithful to each other. Now, we've talked about it in other places, but just so you know, I know some of you are in families where your folks have gotten divorced, right? When people get divorced, they'll tell you that it's an awful thing. It might be the best path out of awfulness, but it's not something that anyone ever hopes for someone else. No one ever looked at you when you were in your crib and said, oh, I hope she goes through a really painful divorce someday, right? Sometimes it might be the best we can do, but it's not the hope. It's not the purpose. So in our church, we think there are reasons where people can get divorced, right? Affairs, addictions, abandonment, abuse, I mean, sometimes the marriage is so damaged that you just can't save it, and you do the best you can trying to save what you can, right? And for those of you who've lived through that or are living through that, right? There's nothing here that I'm trying to say that your parents are particularly wicked or that there's no forgiveness. No, it's just that it's not what God hoped for us when God created marriage. And before you get married, you need to do some really, really big thinking, some really hard thinking, because marriage is hard, right? It's hard. I've been married for 33 years, something like that. And what most of us in long marriages will tell you is that a long marriage is really just a bunch of small marriages put together. And, you know, some of those small marriages are a couple months long. Some of them are, 5-6 years long. Some of them are great. And some of them are really, really hard, right? Before you marry that person, there's going to be years that are really hard. And there's going to be years that are just wondrous, right? And you need to be ready for both of them. All right. 2 more words of the phrase that pays. The more. The more. With a period on the end of it. The more. Now, the story of the woman caught in adultery. We referenced this a few weeks ago answering one of the questions. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. That's icky. And making her stand before all of them, they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They said this to test him so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Again, you see the trap? If Jesus says, forget what Moses said, that's crazy. People are going to peel off and leave him. If Jesus says, hey, let's stone this woman, that's not exactly the message of grace that a lot of people have been gathering around Jesus to hear. So they think they've got him, all right? They said this to test him so they might have some charge to bring against him. But Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again." So there's questions here, right? I mean, what did Jesus write in the ground in the sand that made everyone drift away? Starting with the elders, was he writing their sins? Before you throw a rock at this woman, you might want to remember that time you did that thing with that other woman. You might want to remember, how you stole that time. I mean, what is he writing? Is he writing their sins? Is he writing verses from Torah, from the law of Moses about mercy, about judgment, about grace? I mean, we just don't know. But whatever it was, it made people leave. And that exodus, that leaving, got faster when he said, whichever one of you is without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone at this woman, right? And, no, that ain't me, and you drop the rock that you're holding and you sneak away, right? I want you to see how Jesus doesn't say, that adultery is cool, that it's okay, but he certainly doesn't want this woman to have the death penalty for her mistake, and he forgives her, which is wild because she didn't cheat on him, right? So Jesus is talking like God here, and then he sends her away and he tells her not to sin anymore. I mean, again, if at some point in your life you do make a mistake, right, you can be forgiven. Jesus forgives you, but he calls you not to do the same mistake again, right? I mean, there's a saying in Bolivia that even a donkey's smart enough not to step in the same hole twice. So, if you make a mistake and you're forgiven that mistake, don't do it again. And if you're in a family that's colored with divorce and you're tempted sometime to judge your parents, right? You remember this story that Jesus forgave this woman who had made a mistake, a really serious mistake. I don't know what mistake your parents did or didn't make, right? I don't know, right? And you probably don't know everything either. But Jesus forgives. And Jesus doesn't make you go back, and live in shame the rest of your life. Jesus says, go and don't sin again, right? Do better, right? If you're in a new marriage, make this one permanent. Right? If you're in a new relationship, figure out where the old one went wrong before you jump into the new one, right? He says to her, neither do I condemn you, go your way. And from now on, do not sin again. So there it is in a nutshell, that God has a plan and a purpose for sex, that it's part of marriage, that God intends that marriage be permanent among us, and that you should think real seriously before you jump in it, that you should put all of this on the shelf for quite a while, and live the other parts of your life. And the phrase that pays has something to say to you too that we can talk about when we get together. So I hope you didn't die of embarrassment, right? I don't know what conversation your parents are going to want to have about this. Listen to them. They're wise. God put you in their charge. They've learned some things. They've made some mistakes. And they have much to teach you here. And I will see you on Wednesday, either in person or online. God bless. Bye-bye.